everyone, and welcome back to the Adoption Squad. We are your hosts. I am Mary.
I'm Annie.
And we are the Adoption Squad.
Very good.
Yeah. What's going on with you, Annie? Anticipating the holiday season?
I am anticipating the holidays because it's going to be nothing really with this COVID situation. And without telling people what my line of work is, I am exposed, so I'm not exposing other people. So I'm just going to hunker down at home with my dog like I've been doing for most of this year.
Yeah.
Oh, I gave myself a COVID haircut this week.
You did?
I did.
And of course, I don't get to see it. We might need to start doing some of these where we are actually looking at each other, but my whole approach to Zoom has been no one really needs to see my face. So I would love to see it. Are you happy with it? Or
I am. It's a bob. I have no layers left. So I just cut it up to the ends of all the layers that have been growing out for a couple years. And this is not about my hair. It is about adoption, but you asked. So we do have a hair obsession on this show, on this podcast, a little bit.
I mean, I've had 2 haircuts in COVID, and it's usually my better half cutting my hair in the back.
Aw, that's so nice.
Yeah. So, but I'm definitely due for a new one, and definitely a color. So, just the do at home stuff for me. And that's about it. That's my excitement. And as for COVID, I mean, we received some unfortunate news this week of someone very close to us. And we're just keeping our fingers crossed that it doesn't get any worse. And it's heartbreaking. And, we're just trying to stay positive over here and just kind of keep on doing what we've been doing. So
Right. Well, I hope for the best for that person.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Today,
moving on from the gloom.
Let's bring the room back up, shall we?
Okay.
So today's topic, I believe, is on Annie's end going to be how you, Annie, made the connection with your biological father, correct?
Right. Okay. How I met my father.
Oh.
Yes. So we all have heard about meeting Mary, my mother, and I didn't press her for a name or anything at first, but eventually she just said, "Are you ready to hear it?" And I said, "Sure." And I got his name, and I shared that name with my adopted sister, who I'm pretty close to. And she, we held on to this name forever. I couldn't even tell you how long, a couple years, 2 or 3 years. And I would look in a phone book every once in a while, but yeah, the internet still wasn't up and running with any force, with any steam. And I just kind of let it go, figured, I'll get around to it at some point. Well, this adopted sister was out and about, and she and her husband decided they wanted to buy a camper. They love camping, and they didn't want to be in a tent anymore. Mm-hmm. So they went to buy a camper from a guy who had a lot on his yard, must have been zoned so that he could have a business on his property. So there were all these campers, and she's talking to him, and they're not really sure what they're going to do. And he says, "Well, here's my business card. Just give me a call when you're ready." And I can't believe what a good actress she must be, because it turns out that was my dad. She recognized the name. It's a pretty distinct name, so there's no forgetting it. So she was squealing when she called me. She's like, "I met your dad." I'm like, "Oh man,"
That
I'm
was
glad
your
he's been
reaction?
located, but you got to meet him first, you know? And I'm like, did you tell him anything? She said, nope, nope. I kept everything to myself. So we had the phone number, had his business card, had his address, excuse me. And I let my mother, Mary, know that he had been located. And she offered to make the phone call to kick the door open. The very vague door, apparently. He was never really sure what happened. He did work on ships. He was on the Great Lakes. And when apparently I was born. And but it's all shady to me, really, because there's mention in the adoption file that he came back to marry her. So who knows what she told him at the time?
Mm-hmm.
At any rate, so she makes the phone call. He is agreeable to meet, and we meet up at a diner at a truck stop. And
Fun.
yeah, it was kind of fun.
Awesome.
And, handsome guy strides in the place, sits down, and it's like, pleased to meet you. It was a very amicable conversation. I didn't have the same Oz-like feeling like I had with my mom. There weren't any kind of doors opened for me. It was just like, seems like a decent guy. I like him. Threw me off a little bit when we first sat down, talked a little bit, ordered our food. He grabs my hand and starts praying. And I'm like, oh, this is interesting. It was a little evangelical.
So it was pre-meal.
Pre-meal.
Prayer.
Yep.
Okay.
Saying grace at the truck stop. These burly truckers sitting right behind us. I don't know. It was just a really kind of interesting dynamic for me. I mean, I was still living in a fairly large city at the time. So this was like coming home to more of a country feel. Nothing about it bothered me at all. It was just, it was like a little bit cinematic again, like, oh, this is my life. And I'm sitting here with my dad at a truck stop and we're praying. So we kept in touch, letters, cards, phone. I did learn more about his family, which it was a little upsetting. He had a mother that he worshiped. It sounded like she was kind of salt of the earth. Very religious though, and religious to the point where we don't leave bad marriages. So she was married to a man who could be violent. And I found out the answer to my question about the osteomyelitis that my dad had. He had suffered an injury at the hands of his father. And it was a broken hip bone, I believe, that never got repaired. He ended up having surgery on that hip a couple of times as an adult. So he, at this point in his life, had resolved some of his own issues with all of that, had successfully raised, a bunch of kids, 3. And interestingly, his oldest son was adopted. He and his wife seemed to be unable to have children. But then, the age-old story, you get the adopted child in the house and they start becoming fertile all of a sudden.
Which is what happened in your adopted family.
Exactly. It mirrors it exactly.
Wow.
So although they didn't have foster kids, they did, have this adopted child who I met. And I actually think I gave him, he hadn't done a search yet and was just thinking about it, maybe. I think I gave him a copy of that book that we discussed,
The journey.
Journey of the Adopted Self. At some point along the line, he seemed like a nice guy. And then there's two half sisters, who I met later on. I had deferred meeting them. I talked to one, we wrote letters, and then I just kind of let that fizzle out. And I regret how I handled that. I feel like, looking back, that I was possibly rude to this young woman, my half sister. It just, something wasn't feeling right. The connection just wasn't there. And I just kind of let it fizzle out until many years later, I invite my dad to Father's Day dinner. Picked a mutually acceptable restaurant, showed up, and met my siblings on that day. He kind of ambushed me with this meeting. So yeah, I thought I was just meeting him. And I'm like, oh, that's awfully sneaky. But was I going to spend time feeling upset and angry, or was I just going to go with the flow? So again, I'm like, this is my life. I'm just watching it go by as if in a movie, observing these people at the table, not feeling the strongest connection. Again, that kind of bore itself out. And there was something that I was just wary of. I just didn't know. They weren't open books, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And they had very difficult upbringings, as it turns out. I mean, I think my dad did the best he could. He did end up divorcing his wife. There was a lot of dysfunction there. And he was very open later on. He told me a good deal about it and was remorseful, regretful that that kind of chaos had gone on. He was very supportive of his two girls and his son. Later in life, he was, I think, more supportive later in life than he was raising them. He did he did choose to raise them on his own after the divorce. So that kind of tells you something about the state of mind of the mother, but I am not in any position to comment on that because I never met the woman, and there's been very little true deep discussion about that. A lot of mystery still. At any rate, we got through that meal, and I don't even know where to wrap this up. There was a point at which, my dad came up to visit me when I was in the larger city, and I had a little house on my own, and it was quite a nice trip. He drove out, stayed with me for a few days, and got to see some drama in my life at the time, and helped me fix some things in my house. And it was like a real bonding experience. I really appreciated that he did that he took the time to come and spend some time with me. That was just one-on-one. And he really wanted me to go to church with him, and I just couldn't do it. I dropped him off at the church and picked him up afterwards, and I berated myself for why couldn't you just do that? I'm like, well, I have to be true to myself that we didn't want the place burning down, number one. By my entrance. At any rate, he'd never seemed upset about it. From what I could tell, we just had a really great time.